Welcome back to Unit 4. Okay, Units 3, 4, and 5 all kind of work off each other in that they're just part of the analysis phase of what size of firm are you going to get, how much are we going to pay for those firms, what should we be looking at in those terms. In Unit 4, the key is basically saying how much should we pay for the practice, and then how do we come up with that money? If we don't have any money down or we have very little down, then how do we do that? The great thing about accounting firms is you can actually get into these things, accounting, tax, bookkeeping. So when I say accounting, that's what I mean. I mean all of it, in that world. But the great thing about them is they sell relatively cheap. They sell for relatively low down payments. And you can kind of get your foot in the door with some of these smaller ones with almost nothing down or very little. So, talking back to the last chapter, we talked about the difference between a list and an actual practice. Practice is being, in my mind, anything over from, the 150 to, $500,000 range. That tends to be the sole practitioner range. Anything above that tends to be a more of an operating firm. And so I would call, like I said, 150,000 to 500, I would say would be the sole practitioner firm. And then anything above that, you'd have, more of your traditional firm. Might be small, 600,000-700,000, might have just one or two staff, but, we're looking at that. So I'm kind of backtracking a little bit on some of the things I talked about in Unit 3, but, now Unit 4 is how do we get the money for these? So starting with those smaller ones, we're going to look at coming in with, as we kind of touched on again in Unit 3, a smaller down payment. So we're going to say, okay, look, you have a $100,000 list. So if you can get in front of that seller before they get to the broker, and we'll talk about that later in the course, is how do you do that? How do you put your name out there? How do you let the world know that you're in the business of buying these things and that you're interested in it? Like I said, we'll talk about that later. But, let's make the assumption that you're able to get in front of one of these people before they the brokers get their hands on them. And again, I'm not saying you won't necessarily have to deal with brokers. If you're in need of getting in one of these things faster, you're probably going to have to go to the brokers. If you have some time and you're not in a hurry of buying one, you just want to be in the market and always be looking for one, then you might have some time to do it. I actually had a lady call me last week. Funny enough, she is a kind of a distant relative to one of the ladies that works here in our office, and she's a CPA, works out of her home, has a little list, about $130,000 worth of work, and was wondering if we would be interested in buying her firm. I went and had lunch with her last week. We sat down, we talked about some things. It seems like it's giving me a nice fit. So I'm going to give her 10% down, probably somewhere around $10,000, $13,000. She's going to roll all of her clients over to us. She's going to send letters. We're going to do all things the appropriate way. So this should go nicely, and we should gain most, if not all, of that work and have it come in. I'm anticipating about a 90% retention on that list of clients, as I would call it. Almost nothing down. We're going to pay her out over 3 years, 25%. So, we're coming in with that limit. So we're actually paying less than 1 times billings for this list. We're going to do a lot more work for these people, I have a feeling. I haven't got into the nitty gritty of this particular deal, but I have a feeling we're going to be able to add payroll, financial planning, tax planning, some of the things that, she working out of her home isn't probably providing to these clients. Well, we're going to be able to upsell them on stuff because she is a CPA. Her fees are probably pretty competitive. In fact, they seemed like it when we were talking, that they weren't, markedly lower than everybody else's, which is something you got to be kind of careful of when you're buying smaller lists and practice. Are you getting something where, you just can't make any money on it because there's too many clients at too low a fee? So that's got to be careful when you're paying for these things, that you're also, looking at, okay, this has 300 tax returns and the average tax return is maybe billing at $300 versus you're, buying a practice that has 150 tax returns, but the average billing is $600. Obviously, you'd rather do the 150 for 600 in most cases because, these guys on this side are getting a better rate. They're getting a better rate, so you're doing less work typically for the same amount of dollars. So we want to kind of look at that stuff, and that actually dictates how much you're going to pay for it and where you're going to be able to get the money. So anyway, smaller lists, less money down. Let the firm pay for itself. Let the list pay for itself. So over time, you're going to collect that money, and roughly 25% of it's going to go to the old owner. Maybe another 25% of it you're going to be using to pay for staff to do the work, and then you're going to collect the other 50%. That's going to be in your pocket. That's going to be profit to you. That's kind of the level you're going to be looking at. So what about going up the next step? Let's say we're going up to a higher practice. We're going to buy a $500,000 practice, a $600,000 practice. Where do we get that money? We're dealing with brokers in a lot of cases on these. Well, fortunately or unfortunately enough, we're going to be dealing with them. So those deals tend to be a little more organized, take a little bit longer. Not to say that the broker's getting away, but they're fighting for the best deal for the seller, and you're trying to fight for your best deal. You're still going to come in. You're still going to want the seller to take over a substantial portion of the note, to carry that obligation. You're going to push for collections of billings on that side, but you might have to come up with a portion of that, a big portion. Let's say, now instead of maybe 10%, you might have to come up with 40, 50, 60%, depending on what kind of practice is and whether it's has staff, doesn't have staff, all those things. But so the question is, where do we get that money? First and foremost, I always say, draw from savings. If you've got the savings and you've got the wherewithal for that, you can do that. If your firm has a line of credit, you want to maybe pull from the line of credit. You're going to patch maybe some of these things together. Maybe half of it's going to be line of credit, half of it's going to be savings. Because you're talking about, in this situation, a down payment that's going to run around $150,000. So, that's kind of an in-between awkward place for banks to come in. They really don't want to loan you that smaller amount, because if they do loan you that smaller amount, that takes away from a loan they could maybe lend to somebody else somewhere else. So in talking with bankers in the past, they'll do it, but, the rates tend to be higher. The terms tend to be low, shorter periods, 5 years, 6 years, or not 6, but 5. You're lucky if you can get a 10-year loan in that situation. But you would take out a loan or a line of credit for the down payment portion, plus maybe go to your savings for a portion of that for the down payment portion, and then let the seller carry the balance due. So let's say you buy a $500,000 practice and you're putting down $150,000, which would not be out of the question. That would actually be about what I would recommend. In that case, then let's say you've got a $50,000 line of credit available to you, and you have the balance in savings. So you would then take your own savings plus that line of credit, put that in there, and then look at this knowing that this is going to be a $500,000 practice. You're going to probably generate about $200,000 to $250,000 profit out of that business. So that thing's going to pay back you're going to add that money back to your savings, within a year or two, depending on how you handle it and how you approach it. But certainly by the time that you've completed the 3 or 5 year payout to the old seller, then you're going to basically be able to do that. So to see that return of your own money and coming back at you. Okay, so what if you're going to, and by the way, you can also tap into family members for loans, be creative. Look at possibly a spouse's 401k. You can maybe borrow from that up to 50 grand. So let's say you've got a $50,000 line of credit for your business. Your spouse has a $50,000 ability to borrow from its 401k. Well, there's 100 right there. Now you tap your own savings for 50. There's the 150 you need. Okay, so what if we're going up the ladder? We're buying $1 million practice. Well, SBA loans and bank loans, you can come in with, I think with an SBA loan, it's 10% down. And the reason I'm saying wait for this on the last end rather than go SBA on the shorter loans, the smaller loans, is it's probably going to be more difficult for you to get a second SBA loan down the line when you want to buy another firm or another list. So the longer you can, in my opinion, the longer you can put off tapping into that SBA, you want to wait, kind of keep that in your hip pocket until you need that for the bigger purchase. Then you go to SBA, let's say you buy $1 million practice and you go to the SBA and you're only putting down 10%. So now you're coming up with that same $100,000 that you kind of have on your hip pocket because you bought these other smaller firms over the few years. And now you can really pile on that bigger one when you're ready and when you need it. But SBA is always an option, no matter what the size. Well, for the really small ones, probably not. But when you're in that $450,000 to $500,000, $600,000 range, an SBA loan just right out of the gate may be a really nice way to go, because that may be the only firm you really want to buy. You may say, look, I'm not interested in getting, $2 million, $10 million, $20 million. I just want to do, get myself to $1 million practice, or even that's the first practice you buy at $600,000. I just want to get myself started in this business. So you're able to, obtain that SBA loan with 10% down, and then you pay them back and you buy the practice that way. When you do that, the SBA is going to ask for about a 10 to 15% retention on the back end of that loan. So what I mean by that is SBA is going to hold back a portion of that to make sure that what you're buying is what the seller says it is. Even despite all the due diligence that you're going to do at the front end before you buy this, they're going to hold that back. So, and if it comes back it's different, then obviously the loan balance is going to decrease based on that 10 to 15% retention on the back end. So that's kind of important to understand that when you're dealing with SBA. Obviously, the lenders are going to give you a better discussion and explanation for that. But, I think the whole point of Unit 4 is to be creative. Be creative about how you get your money. Be creative about and be tough with your negotiating. Don't overpay for firms. There's lots of them out there right now. They're all over the place. Don't let the brokers tell you, oh, I got 1 million people buying these things. They might, but there's a lot of them on the market right now too. So you're the buyer. You can tell those brokers too. By the way, I know that 75% of every CPA in America is retirement age or older. There's a lot more people that are going to be selling and leaving their businesses than are going to be people buying and gobbling them up. So especially the smaller ones, the bigger firms don't want the smaller ones. They're looking for, those $2 million firms and above to integrate into their firms. So if you're in the pool that I'm talking about right now, where you're dealing with $1 million or less in purchase price, you're going to have, I'll say your pick of the litter, but you're going to have some opportunities to do that. So don't feel like every deal that you're looking at is the last and only deal that you're going to be able to get your hands on. Get yourself out there and start looking at that stuff. Talk to some bankers, talk to some family members, save your money you got and really think outside the box. Look at all of the money that you have as a way of investing into what is a pretty doggone lucrative way to go. And the payback on it is really, really fast when you're looking at this stuff. So in the grand scheme of things, most businesses don't pay back that quickly. You won't see that return as fast as you would. So hopefully that helps a little bit in terms of where to get the money on this. Obviously, you can give me a call. My phone number is all over this place, all over this course, all over the book. I'm available to talk to you guys about that stuff. Again, like I said, be creative.